Yo, what's going on guys? Tanmay here for Simple Snippets and welcome back to another video tutorial on dynamic web application development using ASP.NET and C# programming along with Bootstrap for front-end styling and MS SQL as the database. I know that's a long name, but anyways, if you followed this entire course, if you followed this entire playlist so far, we've pretty much covered all the front-end user interface, we've designed all the web pages, and in fact in the last video, we also created the database. So if you've missed any of the video, I'll drop the entire playlist in the video description. You can check it out. If you followed so far, in this video tutorial, as the title of the video suggests, we're going to be developing the sign up page, which means we are actually going to get into the C# programming. We're also going to be doing database connectivity to store all the values that we enter in this sign up page and register a member and insert all those details in the backend database in the SQL database. SQL or SQL depending upon where you live. I'm gonna say SQL or SQL from time to time. But anyways, with that being said, let's get started with the actual coding part. So quickly open up your Visual Studio IDE. So coming to our e-library management, this is the user sign up page. I'm gonna be sharing all the code in the video description. Obviously, if you've missed any of the previous videos, you can just directly get the code from our official website as well. But yeah, this is the user sign up page and this is the interface part. And this is the button. Now if you just double click on this button, you can see we are redirected to the user signup.aspx.cs page. So this is that page if you just unfold it over here. So this is that user signup.cs page basically, which is the code which is behind this user interface. So this user signup.aspx is the front end part and the code behind this front end part is in C#, which is in this file. Okay. So every user interface file, that is every ASPX file, which is a web form, has a backend code file. And when I double click on this, you can see a function is auto generated, which is actually the button click event. Okay. So this click event is auto generated for us. And here's where we actually type all the C# code. I'm assuming that you guys have a little bit of programming knowledge of C#, a little bit of syntax, and that's the only thing that you need. So yeah, coming to our web page, using the member sign up page, obviously we are going to be registering a new user. So when a user comes onto our e-library management system, he or she will not directly get access to all the functionality, right? So he or she has to first sign up and provide all the details. So that's where when you click on sign up, you can see the user sign up page is turning up. We've added all the links in the previous video. And now here's where the user will put in all the name. Let's say I'm putting my name and I'll put my date of birth, which is 18th of October 1993. So yeah, my birthday recently passed in the last month. Then we have the contact number. I'm going to put some random contact number. Don't call me on this number. This is a fake one. Again, some ID, abc@xyz or something like that .com. Obviously, we have not yet performed any validation. We'll do that as we move ahead in the further videos. Right now, our goal is just to take all these details. Let's select some state. I'm from Maharashtra. I'm from Mumbai. So right now the goal is to take all these details and just dump it into the database, just store it into the backend database, and then some full address. Okay. And then we'll select a user ID. Obviously every user that signs up, every member that signs up will get a unique user ID. So we will also have to check whether the user ID exists in the database or not. We cannot have duplicate user IDs. So we'll write that code for that also in this video. So this is a complete sign up registration tutorial. So it's not just linked to this playlist. If you are just here to understand how to perform a member sign up, how to perform a user sign up, this tutorial will help you out. So let's give TS11. I like that username. I don't know why. Then we have again some password. Of course, this text has to change to password. So let's give 123. And then when you click on sign up, all the data should be passed into the database. Right now, if I click on it, you can see this is refreshing, which means that the data is sent to the server, but nothing is happening, right? If I click on sign up, nothing is happening. That's because on the click event, we have nothing over here. So let's try to type some code and test it out. One thing to note that is when you double click on this, and if you go into the code of this source, that is the source, you'll get to see this on click event, and this button 1- or _ click is this event exactly. This is the function name you can see. So make sure you save this when you fire a on click event, because this attribute gets added by default, and you also have to save this CS file. Anyways, what I've done is over here I've sent response.write and then I'm firing the script tag. So it will give us a pop-up. So this script tag is used in JavaScript. Remember to give a pop-up message, and then we are just printing some hard-coded value of testing. let's refresh our browser. And if I click on sign up, there you go. Now you can see I'm getting a pop-up of testing. If I click on OK, we have our page as it is. So things are pretty much working, which means now we can get to writing code, get to perform the database connectivity over here. So let's start off with that. Now if you've seen the previous video, that is the video where we actually added the database and the connection string in the web.config file, this is where we've added the connection string. You can see this is the connection string and we've added a connection string and we've given it a name of con. Now the connection string basically has the details about where exactly is your database. Is it on your system? Is it on the server? And then we have the database name, which is this initial catalog, which is eLibraryDB. So that's the name of our database. And then this is some default attribute that is related to the security thing. You have to keep it as it is. So coming to the database, this is how the SQL Server Management Studio looks like. When you open it first time, you'll get this pop-up. You'll have the server name as it is. It will be different for you. For me, it is something like this. I just have to click on connect. We've done the installation, by the way, in the very beginning of this course, in this very beginning of this playlist. So going to the databases, we have our eLibraryDB. Inside that, we have tables. And here, if you go inside the tables, you can see we have all the different tables. We've created it in the previous video tutorial itself. And I've showed you the structure also. So if you have missed that video, do check it out. Here we are only going to be dealing with the member master table because all the data, let me just do a table design. So all the data that is going to come from this page, that is full name, date of birth, contact number, email ID, all these details are going to be stored over here. So you can see all the column names, full name, DOB, contact number, email, state. So all of these columns correspond to all the values that we are taking from over here. And this is the backend system. Right now, if I do select top 1000 rows, so it will fire a select query. You can see this is the select query. And right now you can see I have literally no entry or no member registered because it's the first time that we are doing the coding part. So we have to add something on the sign up page. All the data from over here, from these text boxes should go in the database. So let's add that. So coming to the connection string, we are going to use this connection string into our code. So again, going back to the user signup.aspx.cs page, the very first thing that we have to do over here is we have to declare a string variable which will hold this connection string, and we will get this connection string from the web.config file. So how do we go about this? So you have to come over here inside the class and not over here. It has to be inside the class, but this is at the very top. So it will be available. This string, this connection string will be available throughout this page. We will say string strcon. So we'll give another variable name. We will say configuration manager. If it doesn't show up in the IntelliSense, just type it out. And then we will say dot connection strings. And inside that you can see we are using the con name. So this is the name that we gave to our connection string. You can see add name con. If this is something else in your case, that's what goes over here. And it is a connection string. And right now it is showing an error. You can see, just click on this icon. And you can see using system.configuration, just click this. So that particular namespace is added over here. So namespaces are just basically, you can relate it with Java packages, which has some extra classes which we are directly using over here. So this configuration manager is a class which comes inside this package or inside this namespace basically. And now this strcon will have this connection string. So basically the strcon will be holding this value. Okay. And we are going to need it when we actually connect with the database. So first step is to create the connection string. Now this is the page load event. We are not interested in that. We are interested in the click event. So this is where the sign up button is clicked. Okay. It's good practice to actually give comments to your events and to your functions. Now the next step is on this click. That is on the sign up click, we will be connecting with the database, right? So whenever you are performing database connectivity, whatever code you type, it should go inside the try catch. It's a very good practice because a lot of times there are some unwanted exceptions and some runtime errors. So I'll create a try catch block. I'll say exception ex. Okay. It's a very good practice to keep everything related to database connectivity inside the try catch block, so that our application doesn't crash, our website doesn't stop working in the middle. Now inside this, the very first thing that we have to do is we have to use a class which is an inbuilt class of SQL Connection. So this is how it looks like. So we have to say SQL connection con is equal to new SQL connection, SQL or SQL. And again, it is going to throw up an error over here because the namespace is not yet added. So SQL connection is a class, as I mentioned, it's an inbuilt class, but over here on the top, we have some namespaces added. So it's not there in these namespaces. We have to add an extra namespace. So just hover on this and you can see this bulb. Just click on it and you can see using system.data.sql client. So just click on it and then you can see that particular namespace is added on the top. So step number 1 is done. We are creating a con object of SQL connection type by saying new SQL connection. I hope you know how to create objects in C#. This is the syntax. And this object requires a parameter and the parameter is this connection string. So that's why we created the connection string on the top, because it is then available throughout this entire page in all the inside functions. So inside the click event, we can use this strcon. We know this strcon is holding the connection string. So that has to be passed in this con object. Okay. So step number 1 is done. We've actually created the con object. We still have to connect to the database. So that's the next step. So the next step is to check whether the connection is open with the database or not. So how do we do that? Here's the code that we have to do. We have to say if con.state is equal to connection state.closed. Now again, connection state is requiring another namespace. So click on this bulb, see using system.data, and then this error will go. We've added the new namespace over here. And this is basically us checking whether the connection is connected to the database or not. So if con.state, that is using this object we are saying, is con.state equal to connection state.closed. If it is closed, then what we want to do, we want to open it. Okay. So this is the first thing. We've created the con object. We've opened the connection over here. If it is closed, if it is open, then we keep it as it is. And now we can fire the SQL query. So what is going to be the SQL query for this? So when we take the data from over here, from all these text boxes, and when we click on sign up, all this data should go in the backend database and it should be visible over here, right? So which query is required when we want to add data? It's the insert query, right? So we will say insert into member master table and then we will pass all the values. So I hope you know the basic SQL queries, insert, update, delete. If not, you can just Google it up. It's very basic. So that's the query that we want, right? But we can't type that insert query over here. We want to do it via the user interface, via the web page. So this is where we want to type the SQL query now, because we are going to fire that SQL query once the connection is open. So another class that we have to use is SQL command. So I'm going to say SQL command cmd is equal to new SQL command. And this takes two parameters. The very first parameter is the entire SQL query. And the second parameter is the connection object that we just created. So this is the con object. So I'm going to type it over here. Okay. So now this query that we type inside this double quotes is going to be the insert query. Okay. So how do we write this insert query? So let me just type it out. You can type along with me. I'm going to say insert. Let's keep it small caps because it works. Insert into, what is the table name? If you go to the database, the table name over here is member underscore master underscore TBL or table. Make sure you put proper names. If you have some other name given, make sure you use that only. Otherwise, it will definitely give you errors. Most of the students or most of the beginners do a mistake in typing. It's not a logical error. It's a typing error most of the times, and we are not able to find it. So insert into member master table. The next thing that we do is we pass all the column names in brackets. So I hope you know the basic insert query. So I'm just going to paste all the column names because we have the column names over here itself. So I've said insert into member master table. And then we have in brackets full name, DOB, contact number, email, state, city, pin code, full address, member ID, password. And then this is an extra account status parameter because when the user first time registers, when the member first time registers, the account status has to be pending. Only when the admin accepts or, approves this account status, the account status will change to active, right? So this is an extra parameter which is not taken anywhere over here on the page, but everything else has to come from this page only, right? So it has to be dynamic. So whatever I type, that has to go from this SQL query. So it's still not complete. We've still just typed the column names. Now we have to type the values. So let me just do this in all caps only so that it is more readable. So I'm saying insert into, then we have the table name. Then we've passed all the column names over here. they have to be case sensitive. Okay, so they have to be as it is, as the column names are. Then hit space, then say values, and now in the brackets we have to pass some values. So these values are gonna be coming from these text boxes, right, from this form. So how do we make it dynamic? So we are using the concept of placeholders. I'll tell you what placeholders are in a minute. So here, let me just paste these placeholders and I'll tell you what it is. So instead of hard coding the values, what I'm saying @full name, @dob, @contact number, email, and you can see corresponding to every column name, the value has a sign. Okay. So what is this sign? So this is the placeholders that we're using, and the values are going to come from the text boxes. So that also we have to add. So we've written the query over here, but it is still not complete. So this query requires these values which have to come from the text boxes. So how do we get the text box values onto this backend code? So if you come on the front end, if you go to the design, every text box has a unique username. You can see this is text box 1. So the ID you can see is given by text box 1. Similarly, this is text box 2. So this is the ID. So you can access this ID inside the backend code. So how do you do this? So we say cmd.parameters.add with value. So this is an inbuilt function which does two things. We take the @full name. So this is the placeholder, right? We take the placeholder, and the value that is going to be coming at this placeholder's place is going to come from the text box 1. You can see for the full name, the text box ID is text box 1. So here I'm going to hit a comma and I'm going to say text box 1. You can see easily in the IntelliSense I'm getting access to text box 1. Let me just type it again. text if I say, and these are the text boxes that are there on the user sign up page with all their IDs, and I can directly access them. So I'm going to say text box 1 dot, the property is text. Okay. So every ASP control has different properties. When you want to take the text of this text box, you say text box 1 dot text, and just to like be safe, we will say trim function. So it will clear all the blank sequences from the front and back, from the start and the end of the entire string, and then we'll add a semicolon. So what did I do over here? So I typed the insert query over here. I said insert into member master. These are the column names. They have to be as it is, as we have in the database. Don't make any typing error. Then I said the values, but the values are coming from the sign up page. So that's why I'm using placeholders using @full name, @dob. Now you can give this anything. Okay. So it can be @fname or F or A or anything. But this name has to correspond to this add with value function. So we still haven't fired this query. We have just created it over here. And now we want to add the values for these placeholders. So I'm using full name over here. Hence we have to use @full name over here. If I said fname, let's say it is fname, then this has to be also fname. Okay. Make sure it has to match properly. Otherwise you will get an error. And similarly, I have to do this cmd.parameters.add with value for all the other parameters or all the other placeholders. So let me just quickly do that. Okay, so as you can see, I've added the DOB, I've added contact number, I've added email. One thing to note that is we have to check with the proper text boxes. So for DOB, let's say on the front end, the DOB is text box 2. So this is text box 2, which is accurate. For contact number, it is text box 3. Let's see if it is text box 3. Yes, it is text box 3. So make sure you cross verify this. For email, it is text box 4. It's text box 4. For state, you can see we have a drop down list. So if you go on the form, for state, it is a drop down list. It is not a text box. So how do we get the selected value? So let's say if I select Andhra Pradesh, we have to say drop down list 1, which is the ID. So if you go on the user sign up page, if you see the state, the ID of this ASP control is drop down list 1. So that's why I say drop down list 1. And then I get the selected value as selected item.value. Okay. That's how I access what text I have selected in this drop down list. So let's keep it Maharashtra. Coming to text box 6. What is city? City is text box 6. What is pin code? Pin code is text box 8. The full address over here, if you see, is text box 5. And over here I've given text box 9. So it has to be text box 5 over here. member ID. What is member ID? Member ID is over here, that is user ID. So let's change that to member ID. Okay, so the text box is text box 8 and it is not 10. So let's make that change. Okay, so pin code. What is pin code then? Pin code is text box 7. Okay, pin code is text box 7. What is password? Password is text box 9. So let's make that change. It's text box 9. Okay, so we've pretty much done, and the account status is by default when you first time sign up, when a member first time signs up, it's going to be pending. So I have hard coded this as string itself. And there you go. Now we've added all the values to these corresponding placeholders. And now the last thing that we have to do is we have to say cmd.execute non-query, which means take this query, take all these placeholders from this instructions and then fire the query. So come down and say cmd.execute non-query. So this line of code is going to actually execute the code and insert all the values that come from the form, create this entire query, fill these placeholders with values from these text boxes and from the form controls, and then fire the query in the backend database because we've already opened the connection over here. So now once we fire it, we can say con.close. Okay, so we can close the connection, and lastly we can show a message saying response.write sign up successful, go to user login to login. Okay, now if we get any error in the catch, let's say we get some connection error or some issue in the try catch, from the try it will be thrown in the catch. Now obviously we want to see what that exception is, so what we'll do, we'll just print it on the screen using the alert box. But inside the alert box we are passing this dynamically, so we are saying whatever exception that we've caught, that object.message. So you want to see what exactly message or what exactly is the exception, so that can be accessed using the ex or the exception object name dot message property. Okay, and this is dynamic. You can see I've added the script tag in double quotes. I've called the alert function, but again inside the alert I'm saying single quotes, double quotes plus. So I'm concatenating this object and the message, again plus double quotes, single quotes. So this is the syntax. If you want, just pause it and quickly type it if you want to show something dynamically on the alert box. So yeah, this is the very basic insert. Let's see if this works. Let's actually save this and save this page. Let's refresh. So I've refreshed the page. It actually added one extra value because all the values are over here and the page got posted back, but I deleted that entry. Anyways, now you can see I've already filled all the values. Just the password I'll type 123 and let's click on sign up, and there you go. You can see I can get a message sign up successful, go to user login to login. If I hit on OK, again I'm seeing the same page, but the values are pretty much entered in the database. And how do we confirm that? Just go to the database, right click on the member master and say select top 1000 rows, or you can also fire a SQL query. So I'll say select star from member master table, and if I just execute this, one more thing to remember is when you execute a query, make sure that appropriate database is selected. Over here you can see I've selected eLibraryDB. If it is something else for you, do make sure you change it to your database so that this query is fired for your particular database. Now if I click on execute, like just select this line and click on execute, and there you go. You can see my data is added in the database and it's a permanent record. So full name Tanmay Sakpal, DOB, that's my actual date of birth, so maybe next time wish me. But the contact number, email is fake. I've just added it for representation. We've got state, we've got city, we've got full address, the member ID, TS11 and password 123. Now we are storing password as it is as string. We can actually convert it into a cryptographic or encrypt the actual password and then store it. We'll do that in the enhancements part in the later on videos. Right now we are just trying to insert, and our insert, the basic insert is working fine. Now there is one problem to this insert because it's not completed. That is, we cannot have another member having the same member ID. So right now if I say 12 over here and change the pin code to 111, let's change the city or state. Let's keep everything as it is. Let's say this is Sachin. And now if I sign up, this member ID TS11 is the same. When I sign up, we should actually get an error, but we've not written any code which checks whether this TS11 already exists, right? So if I click on sign up, what is going to happen is you can see nothing is happening. And that is because in our code, if you go in our database, if you go and right click and click on design, remember member ID is a primary key. So when you try to insert a duplicate entry, by default, you're not allowed to enter something with the same ID. So let's say now if I say SA12, and now if I try to enter this values, and if I click on sign up, there you go. Now you can see sign up successful, go to user login. And now if I come over here and again execute this query, I've added one more entry. So how cool is that, right? We didn't have to actually type in some extra code to check whether the user exists or not. We can do that. And if you want to programmatically do that, what we have to do is we have to fire one more SQL query before we actually insert the values. Because you can see that when I'm trying to sign up like this, nothing is happening. So we are not getting, or we are not knowing exactly what is happening, and the user or member will be like, okay, I'm just clicking sign up. It's just refreshing, but I'm not getting a pop-up saying member registered or am I registered or not. So there is no proper feedback over here, right? So now what we'll do is we'll add a little bit of enhancement to this existing code. So another thing that I want to do is we will entirely cut this code that we have inside the button click event. So everything is inside try catch, right? So this is the button click event. What we'll do is we'll come outside this button click event and we will write our own function, or we will create our own method because it's inside a class. So here we'll say user defined method. So the way we create user defined method is just follow the same prototype, void sign up new user. Okay, let's say we are giving it a function name of sign up new user. It's a void function because it is not returning any value and it's not taking any parameters also. And we'll paste the entire code that we had in the button click event inside this, and we'll call this sign up new user over here. So instead of adding all the code in the click event, we can create separate methods, separate user defined methods, and then call them over here so that it looks more organized. Now, as I mentioned, this sign up new user should only be called when we are passing some unique member ID. So right now SA12 is already registered, right? So you can see member ID SA12 is already registered. So if I try to sign it up again, what our code should do is it has to take this member ID and it has to check across this database whether this SA12 exists or not. And how do you check whether a particular value exists in the database? You simply fire a select query, right? So if I say select star from member master table where member ID equal to, in single brackets or single colon, if I say TS11 or let's say SA12, and if I execute this, you can see I'm getting this one record. And if I type something else, let's say SA, and if I execute now, I'm getting no records, which means when I pass some already existing member ID, I get one record, and I can use this select query to check whether there is a unique member ID which is existing in our database or not. And if it is there, then I can show a message in the website saying that this ID already exists, try some other ID. And we are going to use the same logic. So we will create one more user defined method, and this time this method will be having a return type of boolean, so bool, and the method name is check member exist. So this is sign up new member and not user. Let's keep everything same. Copy this and paste it over here. And this method that we are creating is bool check member exist. Right now it is showing an error because we have to return true or false. So I'll just type return false over here just so that the error goes away. So as this method suggests, this method is going to check if the member exists. And how is it going to check if the member exists? So whenever we click on sign up, we will take this ID first. We will fire a select query in the database and check if we get any single record of this ID. If we get any record more than 0, or if we get any record, basically it will mean that there exists an entry in the database having the same member ID. So then we will show a pop-up. We will not call sign up new member. Alright. So what we will do is on the button click event, we will say if, and then we will call this user defined method if check member exist. In that case, we want to show a message which will be like, let me just copy this response, which will be like member already exists with this member ID, try other ID. Okay. So when this method will return true, it will mean that there exists some value, and hence this if block will be executed because in the if condition, if the if condition is true, this if block will be executed, or in the else part we will say sign up new member, which means that when the ID will not be existing in the database, only then you can register that ID as a new ID, as the unique ID, right? Now we still have to write the code inside check member exist, and it's pretty much gonna be the same again, because we are again gonna create a connection to the database. So I'm just gonna copy this entire try catch over here, and then we'll make some changes, pasting it over here. So again, we are creating the connection object. If the connection is closed, we will open it. But in the CMD query, we will pass a different query. And what will be that query? Because it is not going to be an insert query. We are checking if the ID exists. If the ID that we are taking from this text box, does it already match in the database or not? So it's not going to be an insert query. As I mentioned, it is going to be a select query. So let's modify this SQL command. Let me just actually erase this all out. Okay. So that's the first parameter, which is the query, and then the connection object is going to be the same. We don't need cmd.parameters. In fact, we don't even need this execute non-query, because we are going to use something called as disconnected architecture, which is another way to actually do this. That is the database connectivity. So let's first type the command. Let's go to the MS SQL Management Studio. Just copy this and paste it over here. So the query is select, let me just do it in caps, select star from member master table, where member ID is equal to this string. Now this string cannot be hard coded, right? This has to be dynamic, which is coming from the text box. Which is the member text box? It is text box 8. So that has to come over here. So how do you go about that? So you have to just erase this first. Okay. Then you have to add single quotes. Inside that we have to add double quotes. And then you have to say plus plus. Over here you have to say text box 8, because the value of member ID is coming from text box 8 dot text again dot trim to erase any of the extra spaces from the left, that is the start and the end of the text. And now you can see it has become dynamic. We are saying select star from member master table, where member ID, which is coming from this text box. So the value will come from this text box. The next step that you have to do is you have to create one more data adapter class object. So it is called as SQL data adapter. I'm going to say DA. I'm going to say new SQL adapter, and we are going to pass this CMD command. So SQL command object is supposed to be passed in the constructor when you are creating the data adapter. So this is again used for database connectivity in a disconnected way. So connected and disconnected are the two different modes in which you can connect with the database. So connected means the connection keeps on open with the database, and disconnected means once the SQL query is fired, the connection is already or automatically broken off. So that's the difference. So we are going to use this adapter to fill a inbuilt table. So we have a class to create a table inside our C# code, and that is data table. So first we'll create the data table using this class data table dt. Okay. So this data table is pretty much similar to what a data table is inside the SQL Management Studio in the SQL server, in the SQL database. But since this is in the code format, it is temporary, and this is like more permanent storage. So what we'll do now is we'll say da.fill, and then inside that we'll pass dt. So what we are saying is we want this query, which is select star from member master table, where member ID is coming from the text box. We are creating this adapter by passing this command, that is passing this query, and now we are saying da.fill dt. So dt is a table inside the code. We are saying use this query, whatever data you get, you fill inside this data table. So from this table, which is there inside the SQL server, inside the database, we take all the records, whatever they are coming, which are fired by this query, and we are storing it inside a data table in the program. Okay. So now that we have this entry, let's say we enter, enter the right ID SA12. So when we enter SA12, we will get this one record, right? You can see this is one full row. So this record will be stored inside this data table dt. So now we can easily check over here whether we've got any record or not. So that can be done using simple if else. So we say if dt.rows.count is greater than or equal to 1, then return true, which means that we found one entry. Else we will say return false. So when will we get the count of the row as equal to 1 or greater than 1? It will be when we pass the correct ID. So if I pass SA12, I'm gonna get one record. So the count is going to be equal to 1, which means that there exists a entry in the database in the table with the same ID of SA12. So when I get return true, it will be returned from this check member exist and we will get true over here, and then we can easily show that member already exists. Try with some other member ID. In the else part, if we do not get anything, let's say I enter SA11 and if I execute this, you can see I'm getting no entry or no record, which means that the count is going to be 0. So in that case, this if block will not be executed, the else block will be executed, and in that case I'm saying return false, right? So false will be executed or false will be transferred from this check member exist function that we created over here, or method. When I say function and method, it's pretty much one and the same. And then this if block will becomes false, and in the else part, now we can sign up a new member with that same ID. So you can see how we are checking for a ID. So this is how, using programming, you can check whether a unique value exists or not in the database, and we are going to use this same technique, same style in a lot more code as we move ahead. So that's why I did this a little slowly, but I hope you've got the hang of it now. And lastly, just this return false has to be returned inside this catch and not outside. Let's erase this out. And yeah, this is pretty much the check members exist function. Let's save this and let's test this out. So on the button click, what is happening? First, we are checking if the member exists. If the member exists, we are passing, or we are just showing a pop-up saying member already exists with this member ID, try other ID. If the member doesn't exist, it will transfer or return false. So false will come over here, and then if block will not be executed. In the else part, we are saying sign up new member. So in the sign up new member, obviously I have already shown you what we are doing. We're taking all the values from the text boxes and the drop down boxes, and we are passing it and firing a insert query and registering a new member. Okay, so let's again refresh the code and see if things are working fine. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll again try the same ID SA12. Now in the database, if I say select star from member master table only, if I execute this, I'm getting 2 entries. Sachin has a member ID of SA12. So if I enter SA12, I should get an error. So when I click on sign up, there you go. Now you can see member already exists with member ID, try other ID. Now if I go back to the database and if I execute, no duplicate entry is added. By default also, we cannot enter duplicate values because we've declared the member ID as the primary key when we created the database. But when we are clicking on sign up, it was not showing us an error. It was not showing any response. So that's why we wrote a little bit of code to check ourselves if the value already exists or not. Now quick disclaimer, you can do this checking in a different way also. So we used the disconnected architecture. As I mentioned, we created SQL data adapter, we've created data table. Now we can do it in another way also. You can use data reader, which I will show in the next videos. So another mode or another way in which we can check if a value exists in the database or not. We'll do that as we move ahead, but I hope you've got a hang of it. As I mentioned, we've not done any kind of validations as of now. So blank entries will be pretty much accepted. We can pass some random email. We'll do all these enhancements later on. But right now our end goal is achieved. We are signing up members successfully. So in the next video tutorial, what we'll do is, since we've signed up one user, we will use this user to do the user login. Okay. So the user login looks something like this. Stay tuned for the next video. And yeah, I'm gonna wrap up this video over here. I know it's got a little lengthy, but since this is the starting phase of us coding, I'm going a little slow. I hope you've understood this entire code of how you can create a sign up page and how you can add unique users with unique member ID or user ID or whatever you can. You can use the same technique if you're creating a sign up page in any other application. So that will be very helpful. Now, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments how you found this video. If you have any queries, you can put them in the comment section and I'll try to respond to them. If you like this video, definitely let me know in the comments that you like this video. Do share it with your friends. This will be very helpful module in pretty much all your projects. Even if it is not a e-library management, obviously, if you're creating a management project with some login, you will also require a sign up page, right? So this will be very helpful for you. And yeah, that's it for this video, guys. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.